this is my talk on Let's Talk About PDA. So my name is Sorka. I'm an autistic occupational therapist, and I share my lived experience of PDA on Instagram. I'm really passionate about highlighting practical supports for neurodivergent individuals, especially with PDA profiles. So I think so what I'm going to cover today, sorry, it's okay, so what I'm going to cover today is what is PDA, how can we identify demands, and how we can connect with PDAers, and how we can support them through sensory regulation. So today's talk is just kind of going to be a foundation course on PDA. I'm going to do future talks on school support, specifically for teachers. I want to do a professional course as well for psychologists. Sorry, I'm just gonna omit all these people. So I want to do a professional course for like psychologists, OTs, SLTs, and physios, because I know it can be hard. A lot of us will be doing standardized assessments and things like that, which can be especially hard to support PDAers through. And then I want to do a specific course for parents as well. So, because I know a lot of parents message me asking if I would specifically talk about transitions and like homework support and stuff. But I think if you don't understand the foundation of PDA, there's no point talking specifically about things like transitions. So that'll be in the future in the next few months. So, what is PDA? So, PDA was identified by Elizabeth Newson in the 1980s, so it's relatively new. It's not a diagnosis that you can get in the DSM-5, so you can't really get a diagnosis of PDA. How I define PDA is when there's a loss of autonomy, the survival brain activates to protect itself. So if you're Googling information about PDA, you'll find a lot more resources if you search pathological demand avoidance. But I think a more neuroaffirmative name to call it is the persistent drive for autonomy. If you think about demand avoidance, anything that you avoid sounds like a choice. But when you understand PDA, there is no choice involved. It is their survival brain being activated and they have no control. So for me, the persistent drive for autonomy better accurately describes my experience. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous and it's thrown me off. Then I have to like admit everyone to this, but hopefully I will regulate as the talk goes on. But yeah, okay, so to understand PDA, we need to think about our brain. So we need to understand our survival brain, and that is our limbic system. So our limbic system controls our emotions, hunger and thirst, pain and pleasure, sensory regulation, motor control, memory, and our autonomic nervous system, which is like our fight, flight, freeze. Sorry, I'm just gonna let people in. Um, so I made this little drawing to describe the limbic system. So let's say the information from the environment. So let's say that it's the teacher saying, okay, everyone be quiet. So maybe a neurotypical child, they might get that information and their amygdala decides danger or no danger. They say, nope, no danger. That goes to their frontal cortex, which decides the next move. So our frontal cortex is all our executive functioning skills. So it's able to get the information and decide, okay, my teacher has said this before, we need to be quiet because we need to listen to what she's going to say. And then you have a logical response, so you're quiet. But for a PDA, or if the teacher says, everyone be quiet, I can't do a strict tone. I can obviously sometimes, but not at the moment. But you can imagine if they're using a strict tone, their brain, their amygdala says danger. So it skips the frontal lobe. And so you can't make irrational decisions. So you can't think about reward systems. And so then it skips straight to their autonomic nervous system being activated. So their fight, flight, freeze. So I'm just gonna, sorry, see if I have to admit anyone.
You have some volunteers that
Oh,
have
thanks.
said that they will admit people.
Thank you so much. Okay, cool. So I don't have to worry about that.
Admit.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Okay, now way more relaxed. Okay, perfect. So hopefully that makes sense. So when you have PDA, when you get information from the environment, so say it's a change of tone and voice, your amygdala says this is danger, and it skips the frontal cortex, so you can't make decisions, and it skips to your fight, flight, freeze response. So that's why when you see reward systems first, then behavior contracts, they're not going to support a PDAer because in that moment, they're going to hear the teacher saying, and it doesn't even have to be, it's not like a mean teacher. People just have strict tones of voice when they're trying to give direction. So just be like, everyone be quiet. They're not going to think about the star chart and think, oh, I want an extra star for like free homework or whatever. In that moment, that's not possible. So that's why these things don't work. Or like first then also don't make sense. I kind of don't agree with them because oftentimes it's like first homework, then do some like regulation or something fun, which most likely regulates their nervous system. So it's prioritizing a task that you want them to do, and then they can do a preferred activity. So yeah. So to understand PDA, we need to identify demands. So I've broken it down into internal demands and external demands. So internal demands can be really difficult. So I think as an adult, I find internal demands most difficult to kind of cope with. So that would be like hunger or thirst, sensory regulation. So knowing like in this moment I'm dysregulated. So it's hard for me not to like run out of the room. But so like that's my internal body is telling me, oh no, this is a bit scary, you need to go. And that's a demand in itself. Toileting as well can be really difficult. So I know as like a teenager, I had so many difficulties with UTIs, and it was because the internal demand in school, it was too difficult for me to get up and go to the toilet. So that was a demand on itself for me. Responsibilities, feeling tired or sick. I really hate being sick. It makes me so angry. So I oftentimes ignore it until I'm so sick, and then it takes me a lot longer to recover. And emotions as well. So for me, emotions are a huge internal demand. So oftentimes, I'll show you later, there's like a balloon that kind of represents how my PDA nervous system responds to things, but like anxiety will build and build, and I associate regulating my emotions with huge emotions. So I will ignore that until it's really big. And so the anxiety builds and builds and builds, but I will ignore it and try to suppress that internal demand. Another thing is whatever I want. So a lot of the times, if I'm being honest, I'll be watching TV in the evening times after a long day of work, and I'll be like, God, I'm so thirsty. But I can't do that internal demand. So I'll often ask my very nice boyfriend to get up and go get me a drink. When I was younger, I would have asked my sister to get me lots of things. I know lots of kids, if they're watching TV and they want to change the channel, the remote will be right in front of them, but they'll call their parent from the next room to change the channel. That's because the internal demand is too much. And then external demands. So external demands are tone of voice, obviously, body position. So if someone is standing behind me or standing over me, I would perceive that as an external demand. I can remember every single time a teacher would come up and look over my shoulder and look at what I was doing, activities that I want to do. So, say, like on the weekend, if I plan to go to the beach, because I love going to the beach, that's an activity that I want to do. It's still a demand to me. Choices as well. So choices are often given to neurodivergent children because we want to increase autonomy. But then when you give a child choices, they can become so overwhelmed or they won't engage at all. So this can be like really hard, especially for like teachers or SNAs trying to support neurodivergent children. So oftentimes you don't realize, but there's always expectations behind choices. So, regardless if you give two choices, you're expected to choose one of the two. Or PDA people are really good at picking up on energy. So, you kind of know what choice the person wants you to pick, and that's a demand. Eye contact as well, requests, rewards, and praise can be really difficult. So, we obviously know reward systems are external demands. Don't agree with them. There's so much information why they shouldn't be used. But praise can be really hard. So oftentimes when you have a child with PDA, they might not be going to school. They have lots of anxiety. And so their mental health is really poor. So if you see them engaging in a task that they really enjoy and they're really doing well, like say like I don't know, playing video games or something, and you want to praise them because you want to boost their self-esteem, and then immediately they're like, no, and get upset. So I did do a post on praise on my Instagram, but for me, how it feels, so like say I'm really dysregulated, I'm really stressed, and then I love drawing. So say I'm like drawing a picture, then someone comes up and says, "Oh my God, it's the best picture I've ever seen." Um, Obviously that's an exaggeration, which is a trigger for me, because it can't possibly be the best picture you've ever seen because of the change in tone. I would say that could possibly be condescending. And then, regardless if it's not condescending, um, I would, how I would view it for me is that I've chosen to do this drawing. I love it. This is mine. And then if you come in and say, wow, that's such a lovely picture, I would say, I would feel like you've taken away what I've been doing. So I've lost that control. I've lost that joy because it's shifted to now it brings you joy. And like, I just wanted joy. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, so you obviously want to praise your children and like, yeah, just you want to boost their self-esteem and stuff. I think it's just knowing when to do it and when not to do it. So like in later slides, I'll be showing like a pyramid, which will help you kind of understand when and when not to add demands. Um, Other external demands, so there's timing. So like bedtime as a teenager, I would have a lot of the times stayed up all night reading, or like didn't really have like we didn't have internet on the phones when I was a teenager. But like just stayed up all night reading because society expects you to go to bed at like 10 p.m. or whatever. I would go against that demand and I wouldn't go to sleep. And then I would sleep all day. Weather as well. So we know like Ireland, the weather is terrible. So we all probably feel this demand that when the weather is nice, you can't be stuck inside. You have to go outside. So that can be a demand. Prompts as well. So if someone keeps prompting you, I don't like when people repeat themselves. I have a really good memory. So if you tell me something one time, I don't need to know it again. So if someone keeps reminding me, then I won't do whatever they're asking me to do. Times of year as well. I know Christmas is a really difficult time for a lot of children. Um, if you think about Christmas, all the movies, like all the books, everyone like around you in school is all so excited about Christmas, and there's huge expectation to be happy and to enjoy it. And like being like the elf on the shelf and stuff, which is like, if you think about it, really creepy. So there's all these expectations around Christmas, and that can be a really hard time for children. I kind of like hold it all together over Christmas, and then in February I burn out. Um, Also, on a side note, it's really interesting. I had my significant first school burnout in February, and then every other time since then, when I've had burnouts, it's always been February, even 16 years later. Um, so yeah, visual schedule. So like an example of that would be I use like a gym app that has like a schedule of what to do at the gym. I have never followed it in the correct order. I like to know what's on the schedule, but I like to know that I can change it around. So that can be a good thing in schools, is that visual schedules give you predictability. You know what's going to happen, but you have to allow them to have autonomy to change things. So say like I'll kind of show like movement breaks. I don't think I would use a visual schedule for a movement break, but say something in school, you let them change around the activities. Um, Recipes. So my sister is an amazing baker, and so it absolutely drives her insane. I don't follow recipes at all. I will never do them in the correct order. I will never measure. I will just guess. And that's because it's a demand to follow recipes. Um, Social rules as well can be a demand. So like for me, greeting people, I hate greeting people. So I don't like, like someone's coming over, you have to go to the door and say hi and you have to hug them and whatever. I really don't like that. There's so much expectation around it. So now I just tell people that I'm not gonna hug them, and kind of I communicate that I find greetings stressful. Oh, and sorry, choices again. So I was thinking about menus. So for me, when I go to a restaurant, I always look at the menu beforehand, and I always eat the same thing. So that reduces the demand of having to pick something from a menu. Um, So yeah, so this is my balloon analogy. I think it represents how I experience PDA really well. So what can be difficult to understand about demand. So say like if you looked at all these things and you were like, okay, yeah, the school the school rules really are a struggle for my child. Say like the times of year are really difficult. I'm just gonna not do Christmas and not follow school rules or not go to school or something. Um, if you do that, that still won't help support your child with PDA, and it's because demands are, I can't say the word, cumulative. So they build and build and build. So as you can see, the balloon getting bigger. So say on a school day, your parent comes in, turns the light on. That's a hidden expectation that you have to get up, you have to get dressed, even if they don't say anything. Then you get dressed, you go downstairs, you have to choose your breakfast. That's a demand. So your balloon is getting bigger. And then say you have to get into the car. There's also like a huge chiming aspect to getting to school. So you have to get to school on time. That's a demand. You get into the car. Um, I have like road rage kind of because that is a demand to follow everyone. You can't control how fast or how slow people are. So that is a demand on the way to school. Then they get into school, they have to line up and everything. So all of these demands build and build and build. It's important to note that when you want to support someone with PDA, it's not about getting rid of all the demands. I know I say like be low demand, like low demand parenting and things like that. It's not about getting rid of demands, because that's not possible to get rid of all these demands. Like you can't control the traffic on the way to school. You can't control like you have to turn the light on in the morning times, you can't control, even if you didn't turn the light on, the sun will rise, and that could be an expectation. So it's not about controlling all the demands, it's more about understanding how they're building and building and what we can do from stopping the balloon from bursting. So What I do is as the balloon gets bigger, I control everything around it so that it doesn't pop. So for me, like I'll go through all the things that you can do, but like I control my food. I will eat the same breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Um, when I was younger with my sister, I would control everything that she would say when we were playing. So she wasn't allowed to go off the script. I would control her intonation. I would control how she held the dolls, what she did. She wasn't allowed, say, like have any kind of suggestions for play. So that's kind of like how I would cope. So this is a triangle that I got from Dr. Naomi Fisher's Instagram. She's incredible. She's a psychologist. She does a lot of free talks as well online, so I definitely follow her, and her books are amazing. Um, but anyway, she has this demand avoidant volcano, which I think is really good. It's kind of like the balloon analogy. So at the bottom it says the adult asks the child to do a task. The child says no. The adult insists, demand anxiety increases, the child becomes more avoidant, the adult makes a threat. So you can't take threat literally because if you think about a threat, you'll be like, I'm not threatening my child, but a threat is direct language, another demand, eye contact, a change in tone. The child explodes, and then the adult explodes. I think one thing first to point out that I think lots of parents feel lots of shame for exploding. I know, like talking to parents, they get really upset, especially with like equalizing behavior, that they've reacted to it. But you have to understand as your child's nervous system expands and expands, you're becoming dysregulated as well. Like you're human. You can't possibly like I know lots of people say, and I say it, stay regulated, but you can't possibly stay regulated when you see a child have a PDA meltdown. It is traumatic for everyone involved. So I just wanted to mention that first. But I think what's hard is that we're recognizing PDA up here when this cycle is happening over and over and over again, and we're missing the child when they're have showing like some demand anxiety. So we're not supporting them here. We're waiting until they're exploding and having meltdowns, and this is where you're going to get burnout, and it's going to take so long to regulate their nervous system. So hopefully that makes sense. I think also I was trying to think of like why in schools you'll hear lots of teachers say, oh, they're fine when they get to school, just get them in the door. I know they're like school avoiding, but once they're in, they're fine. So they're not fine. They're in fight, flight, freeze. So I think what happens is the light turns on in the morning. They're expected to get up. They're saying, no, I don't want to go to school, or saying, like, my stomach hurts. The parents saying, no, come on, you have to go to school. I know parents get lots of pressure from everyone to get their child into school, and there is that expectation I know from like services that if you don't try or show that you're trying, they won't support you. But yeah, so parents are feeling pressure as well, and then the anxiety increases. The child says no, and the parent says it could even be like not a threat, but like, oh, we'll get you McDonald's after or something. That is a threat, like a reward, which is a threat. And then there's a huge explosion. So this happens all before school. Then there's an explosion, and after a meltdown, for me, like I feel like a huge release of emotions. It's kind of like I'm numb, but sometimes you can be like laughing hysterically, or because this can be so traumatic, you won't remember it. So a child afterwards might act like they're fine. Um, so then when they're in school, the whole cycle begins again. So, oh, they're fine in school. They go out on yard time. Maybe someone like bumps into them or doesn't follow the rules, their anxiety builds. They might not eat lunch because they're dysregulated. And then their parent picks them up after school. The kid hops in the car, and the parent might be like, "How was your day in school?" And that intonation has an expectation that you've had a good day in school, and then they explode. So what we want to do is kind of identify children down here when they're showing a little bit of demand anxiety. Well, I think they're showing a lot, but internalizing it. So they're going to be masking sensory seeking behavior. So usually I do in-person talks, and you can tell my sensory seeking behavior when I'm doing talks because I'm usually nervous and I'm seeking deep pressure. So I usually wear sleeves and like stretch my hands out. That's giving me deep pressure in my hands. I usually be drinking lots of water because using like a water bottle like this. Drinking the water is using my mouth muscles, which is regulating. They might be, say, in school, like standing up and leaning on the desk. They're getting deep pressure in their stomach. So yeah, so masking sensory seeking behavior. They might be controlling food or controlling what other people eat. So say in the morning time, saying what their sibling can eat, or saying like, say you ask them what they want, they say toast, then you give them toast and they're like, no, I actually want cereal. Um, Reduced language. So for me, I don't really notice that I'm not talking, but when I have anxiety and the demands are building, I don't talk. I don't respond to questions. Distraction. So this could be like the teacher's like, everyone get your bag. And line up at the door, and the child says, "Oh no, I have to like organize my pencils before I do that." That's kind of distraction. Negotiation, obviously, and then anxiety. So physical indicators of anxiety. So pale face, dilated pupils, maybe sweating. Um, any anyway, I'm looking right now. And then increased fawning as well. So I think that can be difficult because a child at home can be really increasing control, directing everyone, and giving an automatic no to everything. But in school, they're asking the teacher, "Oh, can I do this?" And they're the perfect model student. That's how I was in school up until I left school and was burnt out. I would follow every single rule in school. I was so quiet. And it's because if you break a school rule, the teacher tells you, like, oh, you've broken this school rule. And then the teacher is putting a demand by talking to you. And then there's another demand that you've broken a school rule. And that would just increase anxiety. So I wanted to avoid that completely. So yes, that would be an indicator. And then it's starting to build. So a child is becoming more avoidant. So this is where you're going to see an automatic no for everything. Even if you're suggesting things that they want to do, they'll say no. And it's just to protect themselves. Negotiation again, giving lots of direction. So like I would see in schools, like the child directing where the SNA can stand or sit. Um, for parents, they'll be like, close your eyes, open your eyes. Like giving lots of direction is giving them predictability in an unsafe environment. So if, like for me, if I can direct, like I would direct my safe person who's like making me feel regulated. So it would be like my family or my boyfriend. I would direct them. And if they responded to my directions, then I'd be like, okay, at least this is safe and consistent, even if everything else isn't around me. Um, you can't eat when you're anxious, so a lot of kids won't eat lunch. It's because when you're in fight or flight, you can't swallow, so it's actually dangerous to eat if you're really dysregulated because you can choke. You might be biting or chewing, so kids will bite their jumpers or their pencils, or I would chew gum a lot. Shifting demands to a character, so this can be like a lot of kids will be like I don't know, say a superhero or like Elsa, and like Elsa's gonna put her shoes on, or Elsa's gonna get ready for school, or say like a teddy is gonna get ready for bedtime. So when the demands are on you and you shift it to a teddy or a character, an alter ego, then the demands are on them, and then you can cope with it more. So what you want to do in those situations is go with it. So direct the teddy and direct the alter ego. Equalizing behavior is something that is really difficult. And when you have PDA, because you're so aware of the environment and looking for any danger, your amygdala is always firing. You can be really good at understanding how to piss people off. So when it's a parent, you know exactly what to do to annoy them. So you'll see equalizing behavior a lot. It doesn't have to be directed straight to the parents. They probably know that if they do something to a sibling, that you will respond immediately, and that will help them regulate. And then this is the top where the explosion happened. So I think it's interesting that I picked this visual. It's because I actually like, when I think of a meltdown, I actually can't think of any facial expressions or like any body language. I did a recent post about how I compared it to like the water. Like there's just I can't even describe it. It's just a horrible feeling. Um, and so this can be happening to children every day, multiple times a day. It is so exhausting. What can happen during it is self-harm, suicidal, um, thoughts or talking about suicidal ideation. If that happens, go to your GP straight away for a risk assessment. Um, Physical equalizing behavior. So they might have used words to use equalizing behavior first, and now they're going to escalate it. Say if you like ignore the equalizing behavior, they'll escalate it and they might hit you or bite you or pinch you to get a reaction. They'll destruct property, so they'll throw furniture, smash windows, uncontrollable crying or laughing, screaming, yelling, kicking, and punching. So what I was going to say is in this time during a meltdown, your only concern is safety. So for me, like what I was kind of thinking about what it's like during a meltdown is like, do you know, lots of like war movies will show like after a bomb, you have like the ringing in your ears, and then maybe like someone's walking towards you and trying to like talk, but you can't hear anything they're saying. So that's how I would feel like a meltdown would feel for me. So if someone's really trying to talk to me and I can't process what they're saying, that's gonna dysregulate me even more because I have like I already feel so unsafe that if someone's trying to talk to me and I can't understand what they're saying, I'm like I'm so in danger. So what I would do is I would move siblings out of the room quietly, don't say anything. Like I would have a plan with siblings, like if they can understand, just being like, you're gonna move to this room, maybe have like, I don't know, a toy handy to keep them occupied. I would always have this plan available. And so, and then you want to like move any furniture out of the way that could be dangerous to them. What's difficult about this is if you move quickly, like say the TV's there, and you know they're going to throw the TV, if you run to the TV to move it out of the way, they're going to perceive you as a threat because you're moving really quickly, and then you might get the punching and kicking. So you just have to move slowly. I drop to the ground when children are having meltdowns in sessions. I move really slowly. I don't make any eye contact and I try to regulate as much as possible. I try, I'll get to it in a little bit, but you try not to think about what they're doing. So try not to think about like, oh my God, they're breaking all this furniture. I would think of it as this is a panic attack and they are so upset so get emotional thinking about it. They're so upset and so anxious that this is how they're communicating their anxiety. So it is an anxiety attack. I know a lot of schools will, when they're experiencing this, it can be hard for them maybe to understand because they kind of see the equalizing behavior a lot more and they don't see a regulated, happy child who feels safe at home. And so it can be hard to kind of see how anxious the child is, because if you're seeing equalizing behavior or like you think the child is manipulative, it can be hard to reframe that. So then after a meltdown, you feel shame, burnout, dissociation, exhausted, hopelessness, and you might be laughing. So sometimes if I have a meltdown, it'll be like, I don't know, it's like a huge release of energy. And then I'm like, let's not acknowledge it. Let's just move on. And I might be like completely fine. I think that is really hard for family members to understand because it was so traumatic for them. Um, they kind of want acknowledgement of what happened. And then I'm like, no, everything's fine. There's lots of shame as well. So, like, when you have meltdowns, you associate all big emotions um, as uncontrollable. So, and it's just like, oh, why can't I control my emotions? Like, why do I let it get so big? Why can't I understand it getting like my emotions getting bigger and bigger? And then it leads to burnout. So what do we do? So we need to find the unmet needs and meet them, find the stressors and reduce them, identify the skills deficit and support them. So identifying the unmet needs is trying to think about what is making them feel unsafe, why do they need to protect themselves, what could be dysregulating in the environment, and what are they getting out of the task or demand if they do it. So this is my favorite drawing ever. It's called Reframe the Behavior. It's based on Dr. Ross Greene's quote, "Kids do well if they can." He wrote a book called The Explosive Child. I think it's really interesting to listen to. Or like read. I prefer listening to books on Audible. But yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think the strategies would necessarily work for children with PDA because there's a lot of questions and demands in his approach, but it's nice to understand it. So his whole philosophy is kids do well if they can, and if they can't, it's not that they won't do something, it's that they don't have the skills to do it. So if we break this down, the adult mindset is so important. So if you're thinking,
What's going on?
if you're thinking that the child is, if you're judging them, then this is really difficult. But if you change to being curious, I think this really helps reframe the child. I think also this cycle happens between teachers and parents. So parents might be judgmental of the teachers, teachers might be judgmental of the parents, and this is a really difficult cycle to break. Like teachers might be saying like, oh, they're fine in school, and then the parents might be saying they're not sleeping, they're really burnt out, and like, it's just a difficult cycle. I think trying to repair this is really important. So there, an SNA create or an ANA created a really good communication diary. It's called the Total Communication Diary, I think, on Instagram. I think it's really positive. It helps reframe the adult mindset. You can communicate how your child slept and what they did over the weekend. So I think this would help repair this. Also, viewing the child, so moving away from thinking the child is defiant, or I would see a lot of questionnaires saying that the child is manipulative. But if you think back to the limbic system, they're skipping their executive functioning skills, so they're not doing things on purpose. So it's not possibly manipulative. It might seem very manipulative, but it's not. So if you change that view to too many stressors and like try to be like, hey, what's the skills deficit? So are they really finding it hard to regulate themselves? Kids will often use co-regulation, so they'll use their parents for regulation, and then when they go into school, they don't have someone to help them regulate, so that impacts school. Thoughts is really important. So because I have PDA, I can be really good at picking up on people's energy. So if someone is thinking negatively, I can most likely pick up on that, and then that will be perceived as a threat or demand. So you have to reframe your thoughts. We're human, so if someone is throwing a TV at you or kicking you, it's hard to think about how can I help them in this moment, but you have to reframe your thoughts. It is so important. If you're talking to like other teachers or other parents, or like I'm sure husband and wives talking at the end of the night, you have to stop yourself and be like, okay, I know I'm finding this really hard, but like how can we reframe this? Obviously, don't do any rewards or punishments, and move it from identifying the barriers. Lots of reward systems are based on neurotypical standards, so don't use them. Um, and then you're reframing the child's experience. So they felt frustration, guilt, and shame, and now from this change in mindset, they're supported. So we want to create safety, and you want to build trusting relationships. So this is important for schools and for parents. So you want to participate in the child's preferred activities. You want to follow their lead. And this will give you a sense of security and trust. I recommend the floor time approach. You can do online courses for parents and for teachers and for therapists. So it really helps you follow their lead. You want to reduce demands, so looking around the environment. So I know that in a session, if I were to like set like be like, oh, let's do an obstacle course, and I set up an obstacle course, for some kids that'll be too much of a demand and they won't do it. But if I just have things like just laying out or like one swing up, they might go over and try it, but I've tried to reduce that demand. And then increase declarative language. So having an exit plan is so important. When I posted about this, it made me like really think about how much I use an exit plan everywhere I go in every situation. So it's kind of thinking about like I hate getting my hair done. Like I get a balayage. I absolutely hate it. And it's because I obviously know I could get up and leave the hair salon as like a last resort, but like my hair will be in like foil, so like you obviously can't. So that's in like impacting my exit plan because I can't just do it. And that is so hard for me. Like I will not talk when I get my hair done. I just sit there really anxiously for hours. I hate it. No. So that's what I was thinking about. Like everywhere else, I always have an exit plan. So I always reassure myself I can just walk out of the building. This is my plan. This is how I know I can leave. So having an exit plan and communicating that all the time is so important. And trying not to, like, if I was to use an exit plan with like my sister, I wouldn't communicate it verbally. So trying to think of alternative ways to communicate using an exit plan. Because, oh, sorry. So, like, a lot of schools will have like kids blue cards or like move and break cards, and that can be like part of an exit plan. But kids might not, one, they might not recognize when they need a move and break, and two, that's a huge demand to give a card to get up and leave. So it's trying to figure out other ways to support them. And then how I would advocate for schools or for therapists to support your PDA child. I would say when supporting my child or teen, they benefit from repetitive cause and effect play. My child benefits from declarative language rather than direct questions. So this is the repetitive cause and effect play. Doesn't matter the age. Like I love repetitive cause and effect play. So that could look like kicking a football at a target for 45 minutes with the child. It could be like the ball run that I posted, pop-up toys. It can be like a lot of kids like, what is it called? It's like a board that lights up, when you flick the switches and stuff. So it doesn't matter any age, they will like cause and effect play, most likely, because it's predictable, it's consistent. So if you interact with cause and effect play, it provides safety. So sensory regulation. So it's really interesting. The vagus nerve goes from your brain to your stomach, and this helps you relax. So stimulating the vagus nerve is really important for regulation. So what I notice is whenever I'm stressed, I don't know if you've heard here, but I go, so I hum in the exact same way every single time, but humming vibrates your vocal cords, which stimulates your vagus nerve, which regulates you. You can do deep breathing, but like if you have a child with ADHD, that you're not going to be interested in deep breathing. You can do meditation and massage, cold temperatures, so like ice creams, like after school or before school, popsicles, vibration as well is really good. So you can get like little massage tools, or you can get pillows that you hug really tightly and they vibrate. I know a lot of physios also use like vibration boards, which is really good. They're very expensive to buy. Yeah. So in sessions, I do a lot of proprioceptive and vestibular input to regulate their nervous system. So proprioceptive input is anywhere where you're using your muscles. It gives you deep pressure. So if you think about a child when they're very dysregulated, throwing furniture is heavy work on their muscles. Biting is deep pressure in their jaw. Punching, pulling, ripping things, all regulation. So what you want to do is add more of these regulation opportunities throughout the day. Um, it can be hard to introduce regulation activities because they'll be perceived as a demand. I always recommend to schools to do sensory circuits, so it's alerting, organizing, and calming. Um, but what can be hard is if you're directing this. So if you're saying first alerting, then organizing, then calming, first of all, it's a demand, so they probably won't do it. And then second of all, it's not helping them understand how to regulate their nervous system because you're basically doing it for them, which is impacting their interoception skills. Realistically, in secondary school, there isn't support for movement breaks, at least not as much as primary school. And so, along with all the changes from transitioning to primary to secondary, they're also now expected to regulate their nervous system completely independently, which is really difficult and will lead to burnout for children, and teens. So, what you want to do is like what I would do for schools is I would be aware of alerting activities. So, that could be like a trampoline. So just have a room with some alerting activities spread out. So it could be like jumping on a trampoline, you could be like doing jumping jacks or whatever. Organizing activity could be like walking along cones and then picking stuff up and hitting a target. And then a calming thing could be rolling on a peanut ball. So what I would do is would have some of each of these areas along around the room, and then the ANA could model it. So go up and roll on the peanut ball or throw things at a target. It doesn't matter what order they do it in, they'll quickly, well, not quickly, but it'll help them build their interoception skills. So, like, if they go straight to throwing at a target and they're dysregulated, they're going to be like, oh no, this doesn't feel good for my body. And they'll go over and jump on the trampoline first and then go back and throw the target and then be like, oh, that was so much easier. That's what I would hope would happen. But yeah, so I would just say be aware of activities that you can offer them and model it, try to reduce the demands and try to also reduce other demands around them. So, like, have less people there in the room, don't have as much talking or don't talk at all, don't ask questions. So, what I notice in sessions is that a lot of kids there's lots of like constipation difficulties. Um, they might be holding, they might not be eating, or they might not be sleeping. But I notice, especially after the Lycra swing, that lots of kids have to go to the toilet straight away, or they'll be like really hungry or thirsty afterwards. So after regulation activities, you better understand how your body feels. So, declarative language is something I talk about a lot, and I think I'll just have to do a separate talk on declarative language. But yeah, declarative language doesn't require a response from the other person. So, a lot of the times, like say, you'll use declarative language when you're trying to get ready for school, and you'll be like, "Oh, there's your shoes. I see your shoes." That's declarative language, but there's an expectation behind it, which a lot of PDA children will ignore, or teens will ignore that. But what you want to do, you're commenting and sharing information, but there's no expectation to respond to it. So it's all about how you use declarative language. Um, this is a really good book. You can get it on Amazon. It kind of goes into declarative language examples and everything. But I'll do another talk which explains it more. So this is all more information that you can um, look at. So this is the PDA Society UK. They're an incredible charity. There's so many free resources. So this is like a handout for teaching professionals. They're nice because they're short. They're usually like 2 pages. They're amazing. This book is called When the Naughty Step Makes Things Worse by Dr. Naomi Fisher and Eliza Fricker. So they're amazing. Any of their books are amazing. Um, this book is written by a mom and daughter. The daughter has PDA. I think this is really interesting because when I read this book, I was like, it made me realize that I was like, wow, I relate to this so much. So yeah, I think it's a great book to show insight into, especially the female experience. And then there's At Peace Parenting, the podcast. So thank you everyone for listening to my talk. I'm going to try to go back to this page and I'll stop sharing. Um, so hopefully I didn't talk too much. Oh, I think there's a chat. So let me just see if there's any specific questions. So I'll post the recording of this on my website, and I will also I can post the slides as well if you want. But if anyone has specific questions, they can ask. So someone said, is a child with PDA suited to mainstream school? I think it really depends on the school. So the main thing is regulation. So you really want to regulate their nervous system. So if the school can provide movement breaks, I think that's really important. I only went to mainstream school. So that would have been my experience. I was able to cope once I learned how to regulate my nervous system and kind of like reduce demands. So I think it depends on the school, on the child. So it's just hard to kind of answer that question. Um, but yeah, does anyone else have any questions? I can take a drink of water. For siblings, think I think it's really difficult for siblings. Like I talked to my sister about how she felt. Obviously, because I only have one sister, so I would have directed her a lot. She's my younger sister, and she went along with my direct. Like obviously, sometimes she wouldn't follow what I would say, and that would lead to big arguments. Um, but I think try to get better at communicating with my sister, and because I obviously still get, I'm very sensitive to demand still, so I would still get upset. But I think I'm getting better at communicating with her. So I think for siblings that are younger, kind of trying to have one-to-one time with your child. And yeah, I think that can be really unrealistic. I shared a video by Christy Forbes this morning talking about when her child was in burnout, even thought of someone was like, oh, just make yourself a cup of tea and sit in the sun. And she was like, that's not realistic. So I think trying to have open communication, NeuroWild on Instagram has so many nice pictures that can be nice to print out for siblings to kind of understand neurodivergent brains. Um, and when did I learn that I had PDA? So I had school. I left school when I was like 15 for 9 months. Um, I would have, like looking back, I would have had PDA obviously forever. I didn't know I was autistic until I was like 26, 27, and I didn't realize we didn't make the PDA connection until like 2 or 3 years ago. Um, so I think someone said, how do I tell my daughter she has PDA? I think maybe I should do a specific talk on that because I think it can be really hard to explain. Because for me personally, when someone told me I was autistic, they just said you're autistic and didn't explain anything else. So that was really hard for me because I didn't understand like what does it mean to be autistic? So I think explaining things to children and teens, it's so important to explain the why behind it rather than the label is so important, but bringing the why to the label helps you understand your brain more. So I think I'll just have to do a separate thing on that. I think there is like the Panda PDA book that Nessa from Neurodiversity Ireland recommended. Um, Equalizing behavior is really difficult. So you can't, so equalizing behavior builds and builds. So it'll start off small and it'll get more extreme and more extreme. So it could be like equalizing behavior playing a game and they'll be like, oh no, the rules, say if they think they're going to lose the game, they'll be like, oh no, this is the new rules. So if you say, no, no, these are the rules, and you follow that. They'll be like, that was their first attempt at equalizing behavior, and then it's going to escalate. And then, say, like, you win the next move, they might flip the game and be like, I'm not playing. So you're trying to understand and recognize equalizing behavior when it's really small. Ignoring it will make it worse. Reacting to it will also can make it worse as well. So like if I am using equalizing behavior and then someone else responds with equalizing behavior back to me and reacts to it, that'll make me escalate it. If someone ignores it, I will increase it and increase it until you acknowledge it. So I think what helps me is that when I'm using equalizing behavior, if you acknowledge it and say how it makes you feel. So say like they're saying like, I don't know, throwing something, you're not going to label how they feel ever because that'll be a demand. You're going to label how you feel. So it'd be like, I'm feeling really scared in this moment because equalizing behavior is trying to communicate how they're feeling. So they might be throwing a table, but they're not communicating to you that they're angry. They're communicating to you their panic attack and their anxiety. So you say, I feel anxious, and then so like the goal of equalizing behavior is that you're both anxious because then you're going to regulate, so that'll help them co-regulate. So if you don't respond to that behavior, then you're not going to need to regulate your nervous system. So it's going to escalate and escalate and escalate. And then if you don't respond, then they'll just escalate until it explodes. And then eventually you will have your anxiety increase and then you'll co-regulate together. So I think when you notice it, say how you feel honestly in the situation, regulate yourself. So say like, I need to say, I'm feeling really scared right now. I'm going to leave the room or I'm going to go for a walk outside. whatever you do to regulate yourself. Obviously, you can't leave your child, so you have to be realistic. So hopefully that makes sense for equalizing behavior. ABA tutors, don't agree with anything to do with ABA. Yeah, it's the definition is demand. Yeah, I don't think it's neuroaffirmative, and I know it's really hard to get school home tuition tutors, so I think I honestly don't know. I think speaking to the ABA therapist, tutor, maybe they are child-led. In my experience, they're not. You can communicate that you want child-led, you're working on regulation, whatever, and see how they respond. So someone said, do all PDA children experience large meltdowns or burnout frequently, or can they be milder? They can be internalized. So they can have meltdowns, but it's internalized, so you might not see it, but they might be like really quiet. Um, yeah, so they might internalize all of that, so you won't see huge meltdowns, but it'll be all inside. Um, how do I know if my child is in burnout? He isn't attending school. Um, so personal hygiene is like a huge demand for me. So if I get burnt out, so basically I hate showering, I hate the transition into the shower, I hate everything about it. So every morning I get up and I shower. That's a routine. Because it's consistent, it's less of a demand to me. Um, so if I'm sick or if I'm tired and I miss the shower, I won't do it for the rest of the day. Um, so you can tell quickly personal hygiene is a huge demand for a lot of people. You can tell if someone stops doing that, that they are probably heading towards burnout. When you think about a child that's in burnout, if you think about that triangle, so they're constantly being triggered into meltdowns, and then there's lots of shame, exhaustion, fatigue, then it's probably an indicator of burnout. Dr. Naomi Fisher came out with I think it's called like the Teenage Guide to Burnout, something like that. It's on Amazon. It's like €12. That can be good to read. There's lots of like activities and stuff in it. Um, Yeah, so you can't get a PDA diagnosis. It's not in the DSM-5. I think so to have a PDA diagnosis, you're most likely neurodivergent. So you're either autistic, have ADHD, or you have both autism and ADHD. So I think what you want to do is you can start with an occupational therapist. They can look at your child's sensory regulation and help you support their nervous system. And then the OT might be like, okay, there are some indicators for autism, would recommend going and doing an assessment, or there might be indicators of ADHD, you might need to do an assessment. So I think making sure that you've looked to make sure that if they're neurodivergent or not. And then some people will acknowledge that the child is sensitive to demands or pressure. I would frame it as regulation, so like insist that they're regulating their nervous system. I think a lot of teachers are at this talk and lots of ANAs. So we think lots of schools are getting on board. They're kind of understanding PDA. There's huge motivation to understand and support children with PDA. So I think sharing like the PDA Society handout that was like PDA for teachers, sharing those kind of resources with teachers can be really helpful for them to understand. um Someone said planned ignoring. I think that's like an ABA strategy. So I know that I've supported children with PDA profiles that schools have done planned ignoring before. I genuinely think it's inhumane. I can't imagine ignoring a child in distress. And that can be breaking furniture, punching people. They're still in distress. At the end of the day, it's still anxiety. Um, just I can't imagine. I think because I've personally experienced these meltdowns, no matter how physical they are, I know how I felt. And like if you think about it, that explosion, I cannot, it like really makes me emotional think about it. I cannot imagine a room of people turning their back to me or ignoring me in that situation because at the end of the day, I'm asking for help. I just can't verbally sorry, I'm so emotional. I just can't ask for help, and this is how I'm communicating it. And if you ignore that, I can't imagine doing that. I don't agree with it. If someone is saying that they're going to use planned ignoring for their child, I would I would refuse to let them do that. I don't know any teachers. Like, imagine if you were in work and you were going through a stressful time, say your child isn't sleeping and you're coming into work stressed. And then imagine like your colleagues turning the back on you and ignoring you for the day because you're a bit tired. Like, it's just wouldn't happen in adult settings. I just, yeah. Anyways, I'm going on too long about that. How do you stay regulated? When your child is having a meltdown is really difficult. I think a lot of parents, I think one, you need like a community. I know there is a PDA like WhatsApp group, I think, for lots of parents. I would join one of those. Um, if one of the parents who's in it wants me to share it, I don't know. I could email it to everyone at this who's here. Um, I think trying to have a community of other parents who really understand what it's like to parent a child with PDA is so important. Trying to regulate yourself, it's not realistic if your child is in burnout and they're not in school. You don't have respite. And bringing your child to respite, although it's an amazing idea, when you have a PDA child and people don't understand PDA, it can be really stressful trusting your child with other people. Um, yeah, so I think having a community around you that understands PDA is important. Figuring out how you regulate your own nervous system. Like, can you like take deep breaths, chew gum? Some people like th think about being in a like forest or something in a safe place. Um, yeah, I just think when your child is in meltdown, safety is key. Move the other children silently out of the room and just try to remain safe and down to the ground and don't be a threat. Um, so a person said would be insisting on the sameness, same SNA and teacher, all be traits of PDA. Yes. So I remember every summer I was so anxious about going to school for like the new year. So I'd have a different classroom, a new teacher, a new chair. Like I hated, when you go on a little holiday or a break from school and they change like the seating arrangement, hated that. Because I find safety and predictability and consistency. So I would notice straight away if someone changes their language. So I can tell if someone's a bit stressed because they use phrases that aren't typically what they would say, if that makes sense, or they change their intonation. That would all trigger me. So if you're constantly have like a different SNA, they might do things differently, they might say things differently, they might initiate differently. That would make me really dysregulated. So I think, like, realistically, if you have more than one SNA, I would be like, have a plan. So be like, this is how we greet the child, this is how we sit, this is how we like look at them. Like, I would even notice. When I'm doing sessions, sometimes I wear glasses and sometimes I don't. And I would wear like the same outfit, so leggings and a hoodie every single time because that gives predictability. And I would try to wear my glasses all the time because that's like I look the same. Like haircuts can throw people off as well. Um, yeah, if people wear like lots of makeup one day, I'm like, who is this person? Or even if, yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. So just trying to like, I know realistically you're gonna have different teachers every year, different SNAs. Try to be like, this is how the child likes to communicate and try to keep things consistent, use the same phrases, walk the same way, sit in the same seat. this is really difficult if they also have ADHD, because people with ADHD like change and like dopamine of moving around, so it's a difficult balance. Um, so someone said, how do you support non-speaking pupils who have PDA? A lot of PDA demands aren't talking. So if you think about all the things that I described, so like making sure that they have the right tools for communication, so making sure they have AAC available. PECS is a demand in itself, wouldn't use it, don't use first then. But having communication that suits the child and is their preferred way of communicating is important. There's lots of demands of like how you approach the child, don't stand over them, don't force eye contact, be mindful of your own tone. So I'd say most demands aren't communication based, so you can still apply all those strategies. Um, So if the sibling is too young to move to another room during equalizing behavior, if it's a baby, so obviously you can't leave the baby. I would just try to make sure that your rooms are always as safe as possible. So a lot of times kids will be flight risks, so you have to put in place things that make the house safe, even if you're not in the room with them. I think making like you could always have like a carrier that you could hold your baby in to like protect yourself. So yeah, I think it's just trying to figure out the best way for safety involved. I think don't use any language. You can move away. I forgot to say, so a lot of equalizing behavior. So when everything else is unpredictable in your life. So say you come home from school, you've had a really stressful day in school, you can kind of tell, say like the mom and the baby. The mom is tired, the baby has been up, she's tired. You can pick up on the mom being tired and then say like, "Oh, are you okay?" And the mom will be like, "No, I'm fine." Because she's trying to ignore her demand. Um, and then you're like, no, I know something's not right. She's tired, but you don't know when she's going to react. When is she going to become dysregulated? What if she gets like frustrated over dinner? But if I use equalizing behavior now, you will get angry, you will have a predictable response, and then you can regulate together. So it provides consistency and predictability. So I think during meltdowns, be predictable, be consistent. So if you have a baby, you're going to take the baby and you're going to step out of the room or whatever. Always be consistent with that. But the more you regulate your child, the more you work with school to regulate your child, the less equalizing behavior you should see. Um, and that can be a good indicator that things aren't working and that there's something that is increasing the demand somewhere that we can reduce. I might take like one more question. um, Oh yeah, someone said, would you come to a school to talk to staff and parents? Yes, I love doing school talks and parent talks. I think because of my experience as a teenager, like I didn't know I was autistic when I had to leave school and obviously had PDA burnout. I didn't know anyone who had to leave school. I didn't know anyone that was autistic. And so for me, I felt really alone. I'm sure my parents felt really alone as well and confused and didn't know like what was the right thing to do. I thought that leaving school and like putting my mental health first, sorry, meant that I was giving up my future, that I would never have a job, that I would never get into college because I took a break from school, which obviously isn't true. I went on and got my master's in occupational therapy because I put my mental health first. So yeah, basically, I'm very passionate about sharing my experience and talking to schools and parents and children and teenagers and everyone about sharing my story so other people can relate to it and understand themselves better. So yeah. So okay. So now I'm gonna I'm gonna end the talk. Thank you everyone for coming to the talk and supporting my Instagram and everything. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'm going to upload it on to my website, and I can send you a link. I'll email everyone who has a ticket the link so you can rewatch it, or you can share the video with anyone you would like. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so